Good afternoon. Today I am once again joined by Knox Msebenzi, who is the Managing Director of the Nuclear Industry Association of South Africa. He is joining us from Johannesburg and is sharing his presentation that outlines the benefits of nuclear technology as a solution to energy poverty in Africa. Welcome, Knox. Lovely to have you back.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. Do you want me to start straight away with the presentation?
That would be great. Yes,
okay.
Please do. So we're keen to learn.
I'm going to talk about nuclear energy in Africa. By way of background, can you see my slides?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Let me do. Can you see it now?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, let me. Okay, sure. But I did the share screen.
Yeah. Okay, I wonder if there's something I should do.
Again. Oh yeah, there we are.
Nope. Yes. Wonderful. Right. Thank you. Yeah, it's on.
So let me do the. Can you still see it?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, all right. By way of background, we are looking at, energy, nuclear energy on the African continent. The African continent is renowned for being the darkest continent, a dark continent because of lack of electricity. We are looking at 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa that have got no access to electricity, and 900 million people that use dirty or hazardous materials for cooking primarily. Out of the 48 countries in the sub-Saharan Africa, the total installed capacity of electricity is about the same as that of Spain, but the population is more than 18 times. So you can see the situation of the proportionality there is not all right. And the large part of that power is actually in South Africa, about 50% or more. So energy poverty is a major issue because energy power, electricity in particular, is the foundation of all economic development. The solutions to address this is to include all sources. The South African continent cannot afford the luxury of handpicking the technologies and saying, we don't want this, we want that. We would like to be able to get to a point where we can then say, now we can be choosy once we have developed a certain level. So that means coal, nuclear, renewables, everything must be on deck, including hydro. So we are pursuing some of the goals set by the United Nations, goals 17 and 7 and 13, which calls for access to electricity and taking steps to combat climate change. And then, of course, we're talking about, in the African situation, we talked about 900 million people that use dirty energy for cooking. So the transition that is often spoken about, energy transition, is transition from wood to electricity. So in this case, we cannot afford the luxury of jumping some of the resources that we have on the continent, like coal and hydro, and of course, nuclear, because we've got a lot of uranium. Nuclear power development is subject to strict regulations. Therefore, it is important that Africa subscribes to regulatory frameworks because it can be hazardous. Anything is hazardous if it is not properly used. Water itself can be quite hazardous if applied wrongly. The factors that we need to consider in terms of when we are thinking about nuclear It's technical, environmental, economics, and then the regulatory. I'll talk to them one by one. The technical issues, a lot of people already understand what is base load, but unfortunately, some people who are wanting to throw away coal and nuclear tend to think about base load as an old-fashioned concept, and yet it's not an old-fashioned concept. It's basically what the minimum amount of energy required by any. I'm sorry about that. But required by any economy. It's the energy or the power that that economy never goes below. So that is important to know, that we 24/7 we need that power to be available to everybody. So that is base load. Then dispatchability, that is the ability for a power source to be put on stream into the grid, to be increased in production or to be decreased as it follows the load. Unfortunately, power sources like solar and wind, you cannot dispatch them. You only get what weather gives you. And then, of course, there's a dynamic operation of a power system where there is inertia, so that if you lose a major part of the power generation for any reason, the remaining generation sources are able to stand the shock of the system because of the inertia, more like a flywheel of a motor car, so that there is no a major problem within the system. Then the power system operators can then ramp up the remaining power stations to match the load, keeping everything balanced and maintaining the frequency, 50 hertz in most countries on the continent. Then, of course, we're talking about availability of power 24/7, 365, comes snow, rain, or shine. Nuclear obviously satisfies all the above. And nuclear is an ideal partner for intermediate renewable energy. It should be seen as a complementary energy source, not a competitor, because as the deployed renewable energy sources, if the sun disappears, it is possible then to ramp up production from nuclear to compensate for the sun that has disappeared at night. Or if there are clouds, or if there's no wind, it is then possible to ramp up nuclear so that the load is met. So that's why we need to have a dispatchable energy source which complements. It is important to have renewable energy, but it is not enough to run an economy purely on renewable energy. Environmental factors to consider. Nuclear is clean and green because it does not emit any greenhouse gases during operation. A lot of people speak about the possibility of radiation and so on. Of course, if there is radiation, that is unacceptable, but stringent measures are taken to make sure that does not happen. It's the rare occasion that this happens. Even the three famous accidents that are quoted, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima, were basically outliers. And in most of these accidents, the loss of life was not entirely due to radiation. In the case of Fukushima, nobody died of radiation. People died as they were trying to, well, a lot of people died because of the tsunami, they drowned. And then subsequent to the malfunctioning of the nuclear reactors, people died during the evacuation, and some people even committed suicide and so on. Nuclear also has got a very small land footprint. You don't need masses and masses of land in order to to generate electricity because it has got a very high energy density. You only need a small piece of acreage in order to put your power station. You typically require an exclusion zone so that in case that there is an accident, there are methods or ways of evacuating people. In Cape Town, for example, the area around the Koeberg nuclear power plant it has become like a game park. Very fantastic animals that are roaming around in that neighborhood. Also, typical criticism of nuclear is that of nuclear waste, which lasts for a very long time. But the management of nuclear waste is well advanced. About 70% of all the nuclear waste that has been produced in the world is still being kept in nuclear power plants in what are known as pools. It is more basically for security, and it's actually a much cheaper way of handling waste rather than taking it out. But there are methods of keeping this disposing of this waste. But there are also methods that are being, or research that is being taking place to recycle some of this so-called spent fuel, to use it again to generate more, because it still has a lot of energy in it. The economics of nuclear are very interesting indeed, because the issues around nuclear is because the costs are upfront and then the running costs are very low. Because of the high upfront costs, it is important to get proper sources of funding. The sources that have low interest, that's very important. And there are sources that have low interest for infrastructure development. Nuclear power plants have a long life, more than 40 years, and some are being extended up to 80 years. The employment creation by nuclear power plant is phenomenal. During construction, there is a lot of brickwork, there's a lot of welding, there's a lot of electrical construction that takes place. There's a lot of infrastructure development, roads, access, and so on. So that is employment. During operation of a nuclear power plant, there is a lot of jobs. At the moment, at Koeberg in Cape Town, which generates 1,800 megawatts, we have in excess of 1,500 permanent workers with meaningful jobs. And can you imagine a plant that runs for up to 80 years with those kind of levels of employment? It really gives careers, not just jobs, to people and their children in many instances. The need for high skills is an opportunity for Africa to uplift its game. A lot of people say Africa does not have the high skills and therefore cannot run nuclear power plants. All you need to do is to go into some of the nuclear power plants in the developed countries, and you find a lot of Africans, which means if the opportunity is there, there are many, many Africans that are educated and skilled, and they will skill themselves up. And it's an opportunity for people to uplift their game. The advent of small modular reactors is going to be a game changer, because a lot of the criticisms around the big scale nuclear, which about costs, about time for construction, and even the safety. A lot of these issues are being addressed with small modular reactors. And on the African continent, because some of the grids are very small, it's not proper to bring a big nuclear power plant if the grid is small. You can't have one plant being bigger than the national grid of a country, unless the countries club together and form some kind of an association so that they share in the resources. For instance, if East African countries, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, for that matter, decide to come together and build nuclear power plant to share the resources. West Africa is the same thing. Ghana, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, they can team up and do that. So the way around having to build big nuclear power plant is to do the small modular reactors. And often the cheapest technology is not necessarily the best. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about power generation or even clothes. You don't necessarily go for the cheapest attire and think that you've got the best solution for your outfit. There is a need for a very strong regulatory environment, because nuclear is probably the only regulated power source. As it happened today, there aren't any regulatory bodies that make sure that people who install solar or wind do it according to certain regulations. But with nuclear, they are very strict. There's the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is mandated by the United Nations to assist new entrants to the nuclear power generation. So Africa can take advantage of these opportunities that are being offered, so that they can create an infrastructure and generate a lot of power, because there is indeed a lot of energy. There's an energy gap on the continent. There is the Forum for Nuclear Regulatory Bodies in Africa, and it is around 34 active member states, which shows you that there is already activity taking place. A number of countries are at different stages of engagement with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Nuclear has been dogged by a lot of fear-mongering and anti-nuclear rhetoric, particularly from certain NGOs that are propagating or campaigning for certain energy sources. This morning, I had an encounter with a certain NGO at a shopping mall, and I said to them, I have no problem with you criticizing us in nuclear and saying this is what you do wrong. But what I've got a problem is when you are now becoming spokespersons of particular energy sources. You better be neutral, technology agnostic, and just say, if there is going to be any technology that is deployed by any country, it must be safe. It doesn't matter whether it's renewable energy, whether it's coal. Let's address the issues that we don't like with the energy, as opposed to having NGOs being the mouthpieces of particular energy sources. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Knox. I've got quite a few questions here, so can I start giving you those?
Shoot.
Okay, so can you explain a base load? So I'm pretty new to this word, like I've got a vague concept of it, but the base load is like that the national grid, a national grid, will have power 24/7. Now, I remember back along when there were some issues with Eskom, which is South Africa's power utility, and people were demanding, I don't actually know who those people were, but they were saying, oh, you don't need base load. We don't need to worry about base load, renewables will sort it. So please, can you just explain again the importance of base load? And I think, like, what is it exactly? Is it a standard amount of electricity that's flowing through all the time, or what is it?
To put it in a very simplistic way, when you run a household, your consumption of electricity, there is a time when a lot of the appliances are switched off, but you probably have got a fridge running and your alarm system running. That could be the minimum load that household has, and that could be regarded as the base load. When you wake up in the morning, and and switch on your kettle to make a cup of coffee, you increase the load. In the afternoon, when there's nobody at home, it probably goes back to the base load. But maybe in the afternoon, depending on your situation, you might not have your alarm on. So taking it to a national situation, a country basically wakes up to make breakfast in the morning before they go to work. When they go to work, if they've got electric trains, they start consuming power. When they go to factories, to open factories, the power demand goes up because the economic activity of the country picks up. Sometime around perhaps noon or so, it kind of plateaus. It does not grow any higher. It kind of plateaus. And then again in the afternoon, when people knock off from work, starting off with transport, if you've got electric trains again, and when you get home, you're cooking dinner. When it's hot, you're putting air conditioning, so your load goes up. But when we talk about base load, is that load which the economy or the country never goes below. So that is the load that is there 24/7. So even at night, in a national situation, you've got hospitals, you've got airports, which never close even when people are fast asleep. So you need to supply those. So that's what we need by baseload, is the minimum amount of power that is required to run an economy. And then of course you will have your fluctuations. You've got your morning peak, you've got your afternoon peak. But the minimum amount of power is called the baseload.
Okay, that clears that one up. Thank you so much. So just coming back to another thing you said, that nuclear energy is actually an ideal partner to renewables. It's not a competitor to those. I used to be very environmentally minded. I mean, I still am. I love nature and the animals and want to make sure that we still have a beautiful world. But I didn't used to understand that everything I was hearing about nuclear energy was really a load of, so much of it was myths, so much of it was lies. And it's taken me such it's such a refreshing experience for me to now to be able to speak to people like you and Dr. Calvin Kem, who we've had on the show, and to be able to explain that nuclear technology is not the monster. It's not the scary, toxic monster that so many people portray it as. And even more than that, it's like energy poverty in Africa. It seems from what your industry is saying that nuclear energy is the only solution to bumping up the extra energy that's needed. So how do you get around speaking to people? You were saying you spoke to someone in a shopping mall, and you say, how do you explain to people that they need to learn? Because we need to have that dialogue with people who are of a mindset that nuclear energy is so toxic and harmful. And we need to kind of like get them stuck in an elevator and make them watch an interview with you so that they learn that because people are brainwashed.
Yeah. Just to clarify something, we would, in the nuclear industry, we would never make an utterance and say nuclear is the only energy source, although nuclear is capable of generating electricity, 100% electricity to any economy. If you look at a country like France, it is in excess of 70% of its power coming from nuclear. So it is possible to run an economy purely on nuclear. But we would never say that because, for example, within our continent, there may be places where there is no access to the grid, but there needs to be economic activity, some sort of economic activity. Yeah. it will be limited economic activity. The kind of economic activity like farming, for instance, pumping of water from boreholes. You do not need to have 24/7 power in order to pump water from a borehole. You pump water into a tank that works like your battery storage of power. So when you need it, you open valves and taps and you irrigate. So that's appropriate use of renewable energy, which is intermittent. You get the power when it is there, pump the water, do whatever you need to do with that, but you store the water so that you can use it later on. What we are against, what we are sharing with people is to say, and indeed what I said to that NGO, which was at the shopping mall this morning, was, you are promoting renewable energy, solar and wind. Tell me what happens after 6 p.m. How are you going to make your food? How are you going to light up your house? Of course, there is small scale power stored in batteries, but you can't manufacture, you can't run hospitals, theaters, operating theaters, mines that operate 24/7 on power that is intermittent, that is guaranteed to be not there at night. So nuclear is important to have as a base load power. And the reason why the anti-nuclear and anti-coal lobbies have been actually saying we don't need a base load is to instill in people's minds that this thing about base load is old-fashioned. But it cannot be old-fashioned. Is it old-fashioned to say, like the example that I gave, that at night your fridge is working even when you are asleep, when there's nothing, that your televisions are off and everything else is off, but is that old-fashioned? That is a reflection of the reality of the load. So a country, an economy has got similar attributes. Your airports, your defense forces that are guarding you at night so that there's no invasion, they need power to be running while you are fast asleep. And so the concept of base load cannot be an old-fashioned concept. It has just been said like that in order to justify putting a lot of renewable energy. There's another uncomfortable issue that I have with this pushing of renewable energy on the African continent. It says if Africa is only good enough for consumer or domestic loads, we're not gearing up for manufacturing. I wonder how we will run our 24 hours mines if we don't have baseload power.
That's something was said in the South African media a while ago. Quite a top-level guy, and he said that people's washing machines and the big modern fridges, and there's some people with air conditioning, that all these appliances were what was making Eskom, the power utility, not be sufficient to supply enough electricity. So in other words, he was kind of saying, well, this is South Africa. Can people really afford, given climate change, can they afford to have dishwashers and huge, great big washing machines and all the modern luxuries that everyone in the West has? So I had huge issues with what this guy was saying, because I thought, well, hang on, you're telling humanity, particularly in Africa, to go backwards. So instead of saying, okay, you guys who live in Mali, where it's 45 degrees to 50 degrees during the day, you can't have air conditioning in the future because, the planet can't handle that. There's solutions to it. There's energy solutions to it. So instead of looking for technological and scientific solutions to the problem, there's a mindset of people who are saying, no, you must just go backwards. You must let things go downhill, and then we get used to a much lower standard of living. So I don't know, what would you say to all of that?
It's a bit like if I'm running a supermarket in a particular location, and I am unable to do my supplies to meet the demand, I start saying, it is these people who are buying too much milli meal, who are buying too much milk, that are making me unable to keep my shelves stocked. You can't blame the consumer for your lack of being able to keep your shelves full of goods. You should actually thank the consumer, because the consumer, that's why you are in existence, to supply the consumer. So you can't argue that people who use air conditioners are the ones that are causing load shedding. It is the lack of, I spoke earlier about the dynamic aspect of power generation to meet the demand, whatever the demand is.
Yeah.
So as the consumers change their behavior, consumer behavior, you, the one who is supplying, step up to the challenge and supply. Yeah. Don't blame the consumers for wanting what they want. Step up your supply. If you are running a supermarket, make sure that you study and understand the consuming patterns of your clientele. If people are buying a lot of bread between the hours of 6 and 9, make sure that the bread is there. Don't supply the bread at 12 when the sun is shining, when the bread is actually required for breakfast between 8 or between 7 and 9. So you need to, as a supplier of services, you need to service the clients that you are servicing properly, not blame them.
And also that energy consumption is a measure of, electricity consumption is a measure of the standard of living. So if one is planning for a great increase in the standard of living throughout the African continent, especially sub-Saharan Africa, where you said at the beginning of the presentation, so many people don't even have any kind of access to electricity, then the planning must be for a greater and greater need. So an increase in electricity year on year on year. So, absolutely. Yeah.
No, I mean, just the figures are just staggering. If we've got 600 million people that do not have access to electricity, my God, I mean, in any other proper environment, investors will be falling over each other trying to take advantage of that situation and supply. And for some reason, that is not happening. And I think we're being lured into the illusion of just renewable energy as the solution. And we've got all these NGOs and faith-based organizations having been persuaded to become energy experts, who are now going around the country telling people that all you need is renewable energy. I cannot see factories running efficiently 24/7 on renewable energy. The battery technology is not advanced to the extent that you can actually have storage that takes you through the night and through, if you've got 3 or so days of cloud cover, then your economy comes to a standstill. So you can't have that. So that the renewable energy sources that are being promoted are not dispatchable. You cannot decide, I am running out of power in this part of the country, let me increase my solar production to meet the demand. You get what the sun is giving you at that point in time. You get what the wind is giving you at that point in time. So you cannot dispatch that energy source. It is necessary, it has got a role to play in the economy. As I pointed out, that we are blessed with big geographies, and some of the areas that we're talking about are not yet serviced by the grid. So we may need to do that. But with the advent of small modular reactors, even those areas that do not have access to the grid can be supplied in isolation without being connected to the grid by small modular reactors.
Right. Yeah, the small modular reactors sound incredibly interesting. They sound like the thing of the future. It's been fantastic to learn about them from you. And also Dr. Kim was talking about them. And also that they're gas cooled, so that you could have them in a situation where you didn't have any water, which sounds incredible.
You would still need some water because it's a general factory, but you don't need a massive amount. They need a lot less water than even the coal power plants. This is why we are arguing that in South Africa, for example, there is this move to reduce the dependence on coal, and the plan by the government is to decommission a lot of the plants in Mpumalanga where the coal is. We are proposing that those sites are prime targets to replace coal with nuclear.
Yeah.
And then everything else is in place. The transformers, the transmission lines are already in place. So if you're looking at a power station, which is like, let's say 700 megawatts, perhaps you're looking at 2 or 3 small modular reactors that you put on there, and they will replace the coal. And if you're looking at a big power station, which is like 4 gigawatts, 4,000 megawatts, you'll be looking at perhaps 10 or 20, depending on the size of the small modular reactor that you actually implement. So we've got a huge opportunity in doing that. We also have got a huge opportunity because some of the small modular reactors are operating at much higher temperature than the coal plants. When you are operating at a very high temperature, you have got an opportunity to use that heat to boil seawater and condense the steam. Then you have potable water.
Wow.
This country is water scarce. You will notice that in the Middle East countries where there is an abundance of oil, they never complain about shortage of water, simply because they use their God-given endowment of oil to boil seawater and condense it to supply drinking water for the population. You'll never go to Dubai and hear them talking about there is no water, there's a shortage of water. They hardly ever get any rain. Saudi Arabia, they don't get any rain. They get all their drinking water basically from desalination of seawater. And they use the energy resource that they have. We have got lots of uranium. We've got thorium. We are endowed with a lot of these minerals. Let us use them to boil seawater, to supply the Eastern Cape, for example, which has got a shortage of water. It's not well endowed. A province like KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa is better off because it receives quite a lot of rain. But the Eastern Cape has got particular challenges. So those are some of the opportunities that we have when we have nuclear power generation.
I hadn't realized, of course, that is a solution to water, the desalination plants.
Yes, absolutely. Because that's essentially what Saudi Arabia and not Arab, Qatar, they are doing well with their water. I mean, we had here in South Africa, in Cape Town, we were talking about day zero when there was a drought.
And yes, when the Cape Town nearly ran out of water.
You will never hear Dubai talking about day zero because they are desalinating their water using their oil, and they are some of the countries in the Middle East who are moving to use nuclear as well because they can see the future. They also use renewable energy. So this is why we are saying all the technologies should be deployed. There should not be any campaign against a particular energy source.
Mm-hmm. You know what I love so much about hearing about the desalination potentials? The fact that so often, like the guy who is saying, you know, people can't run their dishwashers and have a nice standard of living, is this it's like a thing that's pushed on us, that resources are scarce, like water is scarce and so many resources are scarce, and therefore we mustn't use them. And in particularly in DR Congo, there's a lot of issues of you know, don't share your water. DR Congo is blessed with incredible rainfall, and there's this mindset of people that say, oh no, we won't send the water here, we won't send it there, or send it up to Lake Chad, because then they are stealing our water. And it's this whole idea of resources scarcity. And what I just so love about the nuclear, the SMRs and the desalination plants is that's how we get out of problems. We don't get out of problems by reducing and lowering any standard of living. We get out of problems by going upwards in technology. So that's just beautiful. And I hadn't actually realized that the desalination and water and the whole thing comes together.
In places like you rightly mentioned, the DRC, before we even think about desalination, there's a lot of water in that area. I've lived in Zambia. I know that there's a lot of water. Before we even think about, well, I mean, you can't desalinate in Zambia because you don't have any seawater. But the DRC has got access to the Atlantic Ocean, so it could desalinate. But before it even gets there, it's got so many rivers. It's a matter of basically harvesting the water from these rivers. There's a speech that I saw a while back, President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, and he had his statistics on his fingertips about how many billions of cubic meters of water flow through the Congo River back to the sea. And he was saying the sea does not need this water. We need it here on land. Why don't we harvest it and use it? Use it for power generation, use it for irrigation, use it for all sorts of things. Even pump it to our neighboring countries that may not have the same endowment of water. Instead of that water just flowing to the sea every year, year in, year out, that water is not being used. That's very unfortunate.
Yeah. Knox, we're coming near the end of our time, but I just would like one more quick question, if I may. So it's a question on skills and job creation. So you were saying that Coburg has 1,500 highly skilled jobs in working in the nuclear industry. And that again is the whole thing going upwards. It's not people pushing wheelbarrows. These are South African nuclear scientists. These are top level guys. So that whole thing about the nuclear industry is very, very interesting, isn't it? That it's pushing the level of science. I mean, South Africa's world renowned in your industry. So job creation in nuclear, a good thing.
Absolutely. I just need to clarify the one thing. A nuclear power plant is just like any other factory, really. You don't only have the high level jobs. Not everybody who works at a nuclear power plant is a nuclear scientist, engineer, or physicist. We have messengers, we have lawyers, we have all skills, all careers, if you like. We have people who sweep we have cleaners. So it's a factory which manufactures electricity. It's not like every person that you come across is a highly trained physicist and whatever. No, the physicists have got their place and their expertise. It's like saying everybody who works for a bakery is a baker. There are drivers who actually, when the bread has been baked, it has to be delivered to the consumers. Those people are not baked. They don't know how to mix the formulas. And so there's a variety of skills that we have. So coming back to this issue about Africa and the lack of skills, it is not true. It's not true that Africans are not capable of learning to run a nuclear power plant. They are perfectly capable. All you need is to have a program. When you have a program, that includes skills development. I can argue and say Saudi Arabians do not know how to brew beer. Yes, of course they don't, because that industry does not exist in Saudi Arabia. But go to a country where brewing of beer is an industry, you will find brewers. Yeah. So you can't, if we don't have a nuclear program, you can't argue and say there are no nuclear scientists. What would they be doing if there is no program? Would they be tweaking their fingers? Once you have a program, the program involves skills development. If it means seconding some people to a nuclear country, we will do so. But we are fortunate in South Africa, in particular, that we have got 2 nuclear power plants, the Quebec and the research reactor. And many other African countries have got research reactors. They don't have power generation. But to migrate from that to upskill or to get more skills out of that, it is not a major challenge. It's actually a very interesting challenge. It will make young people who are at varsity look forward to careers in science and engineering and maths.
Mm-hmm. Knox Msebenzi, once again, thank you so much for joining us and enlightening us, teaching us, helping us learn that, there's so many things that can be done, and so many things that can be done and must be done as quickly as possible in terms of solutions to energy poverty, because we all want to end of poverty in every single African country. So once again, thank you so much for being with us and teaching us. And I do hope you will come back soon.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.